And as a few more folks are joining us this morning, we're excited to kick off another conversation with Sharon and Parker, with special guests Judith and Robert today, talking about cultivating healthy relationships. And we're coming together in a time of a lot of summer breaks, folks coming in and out. So we're really thrilled to continue holding this space. And over to you, Aaron.
Thank you, Claire. We'd love to say thank you to Judith and to Robert for joining us for today's session. And really excited about the kind of conversation that you both are going to have with our wonderful hosts, Sharon and Parker. Sharon, Parker, I think without further ado, we'll pass it into both your hands.
Hi, I'm so delighted to be here. I'm always happy for the chance to be with Parker and these wonderful friends joining us, whom I haven't really been in touch with for like, I hate to think, 30 years, 40 years, something unconscionable has gone by. But it's so amazing. I followed their work with tremendous admiration and delight. And I'm very happy about this topic because these topics that kind of, in my mind, unite all aspects of our lives, that form a whole, are very exciting to me because it's so easy to be compartmentalized and feel like, well, that's where my values show up, but not here or whatever. But I really see this idea as something that unites every aspect of our lives and brings it all together.
Well, it's great to be back with you, Sharon, and with this community and the folks who hold space for it. And I too am just delighted that Robert and Judith could be with us today. I'm inspired and enriched by their work. And I've been thinking a lot about this topic of healthy relationships as we've approached today, and thinking about the simple fact that since all reality is relational, there's not a single thing that isn't relational. This topic has a very far reach. It can go all the way out to the atoms and the stars, which are also in us. And that actually set me on a train of thinking about our relationship with nature as well as with people, and how I'm sure many of the principles that apply to healthy relationships with people also apply to our relationship with nature and with the larger world. So I'll be listening for some of that today, although I'll try to restrain my astrophysics impulses and keep it focused on where we live in this moment. So thank you for being here, Robert and Judith, and Sharon, over to you.
Thank you. Now aren't we made of stardust actually? Isn't that a truth?
Absolutely.
True. Yeah.
Joni Mitchell announced it before any astrophysicist.
That's right. So I'll start really by asking Judith and Robert, what does the healthy relationship look like? And I know that a great deal of what they're going to offer us is going to be experiential, which I'm very excited about. So when one uses that term, a healthy relationship, what are we actually talking about?
I think the first thing is it's a mutuality to both people in a relationship. Aaron, you just spoke to me. Do you feel like we're in a healthy relationship? Is it satisfying to you? Do I feel like it is? And that's one metric for health. Is it feels good. We both feel like it's meeting our needs. But there are some perhaps objective measures. Again, the research of John Gottman, who really studied healthy relationships, showed that a healthy relationship, one that actually would endure, had a minimum of 5 positive interactions to 1 negative interaction. But then I also think it's important to look from the outside. A healthy relationship, what does it give back to life? 2 people could both say, I'm happy in this relationship, I'm happy, but it's actually toxic, not just for them, but it's emanating toxicity into the world. And so we'd also say a healthy relationship is one which contributes back to life, which is part of that network of life, and it's giving something back to it that's healthy. Is that what I said last time?
Close enough.
Okay.
It was good. Yeah, so not surprisingly, my impulse is to talk about sort of the middle ground in there, right? That a healthy relationship does not, in my view, mean that everything is always easy or smooth. But healthy relationship includes developing the skills, intention, and capacity to work through challenges and difficulties, disagreements. I would say in 50 plus years of marriage, we've had a few edges, let me call it that way, and quite a lot of them. And then the conditions of life that are always changing, that include challenges of all kinds, and how we navigate that individually and the other person. And if we talk first primarily about our personal relationships, that has a particular flavor to it. The people that we're really deeply in relationship with, that we care about, and that we may, in fact, rub against a little more frequently or passionately than we may with someone who's further away from us in both our heart and our lives.
I say, and then in listening to you, Jude, that a healthy relationship is one which embraces the challenges and allows both parties to grow, because it's a real opportunity relationship. You're being mirrored back to yourself for that opportunity for life. That's part of health, is that willingness to engage with what you talked about.
Right. And I like what you just said. And Sharon, I want to hear back from you because we can talk. But that notion that we allow each other to change, that we really consciously try not to fixate on our stories and interpretation of who the other is, and that we allow them to change and grow also. The classic is you graduate from high school, you go off to college, you're doing whatever, you think you're pretty grown up, and you come home and you regress 10 years because of the view and your own habits. So I think allowing that space for growth and not believing our fixation and our story about who the other person is.
Yeah, it seems to me that conflict is not the end of a relationship, or on a larger scale, the end of a community. It's actually the gateway into the real thing, because until you've been there, until you've done that, and until you've made space for that to happen, that conflict to happen on an ongoing basis, whether it's an intentional community or a friendship or a partnership, it's not real. That's just ain't the way life is. And just one other thing to toss into the conversational pot. I've always loved Rainer Maria Rilke's definition of love. It's not the only kind of love, but it's one kind that I think we ignore at our peril. He says, love is this, that two solitudes border, protect, and salute one another. And that's the space to grow. That is a result of love. And it's a kind of love that isn't trying to change the other person into your model of the perfect partner, but is bordering, protecting, and saluting the mystery of his or her solitude. So there's that.
Beautiful. I share your love of Rilke. And, there's this notion also that, what you spark for me, Parker, there, and that is the notion of welcoming everything, welcoming all parts of ourselves, welcoming all parts of the other, so that we're not shutting down and creating those kinds of limitations where we feel like we have to act or be a certain way. But that also is married with skillful means of learning those arts and skills of how do we have like conflict in a healthy way.
Which brings us to really one of our primary practices in all relationship work that we do, which is the practice of self-responsibility. That it's so natural in relationships to start to fixate, particularly if there's discomfort or the seeds of conflict. Well, if only they would change, and we become experts in their what would be so much better if they would learn and grow, rather than stepping back to see, okay, what are the seeds of that disturbance in us, welcoming that, and then taking responsibility for creating what we want, rather than the blaming for what we're not getting.
Tall order a lot of the time, but
indeed. Well, I was thinking, I really appreciate everything you said, because it's not just fixating on the story about the other, it's fixating about the story about ourselves. And when you said mutuality, like right in the beginning of this conversation, I thought, well, a part of mutuality, perhaps when it's healthy, is also flexibility. It's like, I'm not always the receiver and you always the giver. And I'm not always the giver with you always the receiver. And that there's a kind of possibility of movement and flow there that is very interesting.
Yeah. So I think what I hear in what you're saying is this notion of reciprocity, is that it feels in some way balanced, which at least in my experience doesn't always look like I do this and you do that and then you do that and I do this, but we may have different gifts or different tendencies as a personality, but the whole gestalt of it wants to feel like it's not a one-way street. And we're going to be addressing some of that in one of the processes that we're going to do with you guys.
Yeah, it seems that you know, we could talk on so many things. We picked a couple of themes, I think, for this conversation. One of which is compassion. One of which is what makes for a healthy relationship is that there's an outflow of energy from one to another human being. There is a cherishing, a regarding, and respect that also came through in the Rilke poem part. There's a respect. It's an energy that comes from one to another. We also like to say that it's too important to kind of, it's not an emotion. It's not simply like, because the emotions come and go. It's actually a dedication. It's a practice. It's a choice to open our hearts to another human being, to see the good in them, to offer them well wishes. We consider that really one of the fundamental practices for any kind of relationship.
Fantastic. So maybe we can move on to the topic of empathy or compassion. And I, out of compassion for everyone, will go on mute because I've been bringing you the sounds of New York City inadvertently, and I was waiting till I could go on mute myself. So,
well, we're going to roll into a guided meditation on the quality, or how do we cultivate empathy, because it's one thing to have a concept about it. Oh, we could all sign on like, oh yeah, I want to be empathetic and that's something I care about. But actually embodying that and feeling it and communicating it is another level, which of course ties into the commitment to growth and to self-responsibility. So if you all would follow along with me, I'm going to just give you the prelude that I'm going to be in a moment asking you to do a rather weird thing, which is just in a moment when I snap a finger, I'm going to ask you to jump into the body of another person, and I'm going to be walking you through what is it like to be this other. So if you would close your eyes and just settle in, take a few settling breaths. And then I'd like you to call to mind, trusting whoever shows up, someone that you are in close relationship to. It could be a family member, it could be a partner, but someone who you're in close relationship to, who you know a good deal about their life and even their past circumstances, and that you care about, that you would like to cultivate more compassion and empathy towards them. So I'm just going to give you like 30 seconds. Trust who shows up. You can do it again with other people. So just make a choice. Okay. And we're going to go with whoever arose in your awareness. And if no one did, then just choose someone. Okay. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. Jump into their body. Just feel yourself in this body. And feel your gender, your size, your age, any physical conditions. Walk around and feel and see the world in the body of this person. And as this person, feel the weight of your past experiences, both the positive and the challenging. What do you carry with you into your life? What are the conditions that you grew up in that have shaped you? As this other, what are the beliefs, the sensitivities that you carry with you throughout your life through different circumstances? Are you introverted or extroverted? Where do you source yourself? Do you need to go away from people to replenish, or do you need to go more easily into relationship? And as this other, let yourself see, know, feel, and in whatever way information comes for you, their history, your history in this case, the culture, the family you came from. What are the baggage, the traumas, the challenges that you carry, that you have tried in the best way you have known to work with, to heal from? And as this being in this body, what are your successes, the things that you feel good about in your life? That may be in the territory of accomplishments and work. It may be in the territory of relationship. It may be in the territory of healing yourself in different ways, or opening your awareness, or learning things. Whatever it is, what are your successes? And what are your failures as this other in their body, having lived their life? Where do you carry a sense of failure or disappointment in yourself, in life? Where do you feel a sense of grounded confidence and safety? And where do you not? Where are things shaky for you? Where do you feel unsure? What are triggers for you? What sets you off and activates that sense of not being safe? And what are your joys as this other in their body, in their life? What are the joys? What gives you pleasure and satisfaction? And really let yourself see, feel, think any way that information easily comes to you. What do you see as your shortcomings? Where would you like to grow? Where is life difficult? Do you deal with biochemical challenges, anxiety, depression? Is there trauma, both small trauma and big trauma, that you've had to grapple with? And now imagine, as this person, you're waking up in the morning, and how do you feel? Feel the surroundings. Is anyone there with you when you start your day? And walk through the activity of your daily life, from how it is to get ready for your day, what you do, the activity of your work or other expressions or engagements. Just take this next minute from beginning to end to walk as this other through a day in their life, in your imagination, in your knowing. And feel the sense of weight or responsibility that you carry. When you encounter others in your life, how do you feel? How do you manage? How are you good in relationship, where do you feel challenged? And feel the support that is there. And feel the absence of it, any sense of loneliness or deprivation. Feel your sense of desire, your sense of purpose. What still feels left, perhaps, that on your deathbed you would wish you had done, you had experienced, you had healed, where you wish you had perhaps achieved more, or where you perhaps feel like, I'd really like to feel more at peace, more at ease. And now, as this other in their body, carrying their whole history, the hard, the challenging, the joyful, the work they've done, the work they haven't done, their influences past and present. And you're going to see yourself as the other come into direct relationship with yourself. And feel what it's like as this other to encounter you. What are the gifts they bring? What are the gifts and challenges they bring? Where are they an addition and help ease and bring joy? As the other, looking at yourself, feeling yourself, where do they bring challenge and difficulty, unhappiness, loneliness, and loss? And really take the next minute to really feel yourself in this relationship as the other with yourself. And as you feel that, really take stock. And then on the count of 3, I'm going to have you jump back into your own body. Don't think about it. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, and jump. And take some deep breaths. Resettle yourself inside your own form as yourself. And notice what it is that you take from this experience. How might it help you feel more compassionate, more empathic, more understanding of this person? And you can open your eyes.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Judith. Nice to go deeper that way. Appreciate the opportunity. So as we move into a next step in this conversation, one of the things that Sharon and I are eager to talk about with you involves the whole question of boundaries in relationships, because we know that relationships that become, my word, I guess, is entangled, are simply not good. There's nothing good can come out of an entangled relationship, whether it's entangled in anger or entangled in a kind of support for bad habits or whatever it may be. So we wanted to ask you in a conversational way about your understanding of the importance of boundaries in relationships and some thoughts about why they're sometimes hard to maintain and how we get to there from here.
I love this, and I think the first context that feels correct or in my heart to say is that the relational flow and the way in which you spoke at the beginning, Parker, which I completely agree and echo about our interconnectedness, is that in fact, life is a flow of merging and opening and being back in our individual selves, that we can't live effectively in one place. We can go way, what we used to call back in the day, way woo woo, and everything is love and everything is openness and compassion, which of course is a wonderful quality and capacity to nourish and express. Or we can go rigid, right? And we can go like, I'm really separate, and I have no impact, or you don't have any impact, and protected. And then there's the healthy place of each, which is a healthy experience of each, but it's also a capacity to move back and forth, to read yourself, to read the other, to read the circumstances, and to hopefully over time become more skillful in that movement.
So we're looking for the balance, for that impulse to like be with, to give ourselves, to join, to be one. With, I would say, the balance point is also, it's a certain kind of mindfulness or wisdom to balance that, because also we're often meeting each other in a social context, and so the boundaries become important. Whether it's a love relationship is a different boundary than a parent-child relationship, is different than a manager and a colleague, and so to be able to kind of balance whatever that impulse is, to merge with an understanding of what's appropriate, what's the right relationship in a given moment. And these two are beautiful balances. And some of us as personalities will tend towards too much rigidity, too much holding back, or too much of that yielding. Or we may find ourselves one way in relationship and another relationship. I think what we'd like to do is, again, to experience, to give you the balance experience, to that empathic, to that compassion of what it's like to be conscious. Because that's really what we're talking about. It's appropriate boundaries. It's finding the boundaries that are generative, that protect what needs to be protected, and give honor to the context in which we're in. And so for doing this, first I want to do a very short meditation to really feel the difference between a well-boundaried and a healthy boundaried relationship. And then, Parker, as you suggested, a second also short practice of what do you do about it, an actual meditation practice to help you reclaim your boundary that you can use proactively in your life.
Mm-hmm. I just want to say a 10-second, what you said about different boundaries with different relationships at different times. And I want to this has been such a important wisdom passed on to me when our now 45-year-old daughter was young, our first child. And she was 2 and starting to do that thing, 2 years old. And an older, wiser friend with older children said to me, Judith, a parent's job is to set the boundaries. A child's job is to push against them wherever they are. So you might as well set them where you want them.
Thank you, Ward. So again, choose a relationship where you sense there's some boundary issue for you, a relationship where you have a hard time maintaining that sense of integrity and separateness. And we're going to kind of work specifically with that one as kind of an exploration for this territory. Okay. So actually, first, we're going to read you our little checklist, kind of give you a little research on relationships. So as you think about this person, do you feel obligated or unfree? When this person asks you to do something, or asks something of you, do you somehow feel like you're obligated to do it? If that's so, would you actually raise your hand, please? We culled this from our own research, so you'll see our hands going up a lot on ourselves.
Just consider mine raised. So with this person, do you find yourself sometimes more interested in fixing their challenges than they are themselves?
Do you experience what we call emotional contagion, where they're feeling something and all of a sudden it's like you're feeling it too? You didn't kind of decide to. It's literally, it just, the feeling jumped right from them to you. Do you experience that? You could raise your hand if that is something that you experience.
Great. How about the territory with this person of feeling less powerful, less clear, less resourceful, more emotional in the presence of this person than you do with some others?
That would apply to me out in the world. I'm this person, working with leadership in large organizations, and I come home and I find myself wimpy sometimes with you. Do you sometimes feel controlled by the person, or that you get rigid because you're afraid you're going to get controlled if you don't kind of get very rigid? Does that apply to you?
Do you have difficulty saying a clear and kind no when you have a no?
Yeah. Do you sometimes feel like you have to justify yourself? Like you're sitting there kind of just self-justifying in this person's presence. There's something about that relationship which brings that out of you.
Right. Do you experience your sense of self-worth, confidence, ease rising and falling, or being at risk with the energy and judgments or verbalizations or nonverbals of this other person?
Do you sometimes have difficulty knowing what you think and feel when this person is expressing strong opinions? Do you get lost somehow in the field of that relationship?
And do you walk around having arguments in your head with them when they're not actually present and no words are being expressed?
Yeah, so these are some of the signs we kind of look for in a relationship if you're having some of these tendencies. What we'd like you to do now is to kind of explore in meditation the actual energetic experience of having poor boundaries. So you're going to be working with the person that you kind of identified that this happens most with, and close your eyes for a moment. Take one deep breath to settle your body. And then I'd like you to see this person's face as if they're sitting just a few feet in front of you. And feel the quality of energy in the space between you. How would you describe the feeling of the quality of energy in the space between you and this other? Kind of psychic space. What's the quality of energy? Imagine this person is wanting something from you. How do you start to feel when they want something from you? Particularly, how free do you feel to not give them what they want, to say, no thank you, set a boundary? Now imagine this person's upset about something. How do you feel being in the presence with this person when they're upset? Does it feel sticky? Do you feel pulled in some way? Now imagine this person wants to talk to you about some kind of concern they're having about you, about the relationship. How do you feel when they approach you to share their concerns about you and about the relationship? What happens in you? Imagine you hear their voice on a voicemail to you, and what's the first instant reaction you have when you see them and feel them reaching out to you? And now let the image of this person fade away, and take a deep breath and let it out with an audible sigh. So that's one experience. And now, see another face. This is the face of a person or a friend with whom you have relatively healthy boundaries. A person or a friend with whom you have relatively healthy boundaries. And imagine they're sitting a few feet in front of you. And feel the quality of the space of the energy between you and this person. Imagine this person wants something from you, makes a request. How free do you feel to not have to do what they ask of you in this relationship? Imagine this person's upset about something. How do you feel being in the presence of this person when they're upset? How honest are you with this person? How free do you feel to be yourself in their presence relative to the other? And now let the image of this person fade away. And so that's just a very quick, energetic experience of what unhealthy boundary looks like and what healthy boundary looks like. When we have poor boundaries with someone, we often end up closing our hearts to protect. We get into a state of hypervigilance, constantly taking our cues. So we're going to give you a very simple practice now That's a way of reclaiming your boundaries. Open your eyes for 1 minute and watch me. I'm going to give you 2 physical postures or positions. The first, I have to raise my hands here, is your hands are outstretched as if you're reaching towards someone, palms outstretched. That's position 1. In position 2, you're going to pull back your hands on the in-breath, as if you're drawing energy in. And then turn your palms down. And as you exhale, you're going to imagine you're sending your energy into the ground, into our real mother, Mother Earth. And literally what we're doing is we're withdrawing our unhealthy attachments, our unhealthy projections onto this other person. With our in-breath, we pull back in position 1 on the in-breath, and the out-breath, we're sending where it belongs. We're grounding into our own integrity and into the earth so that we can be separate enough to be in right relationship with this person. It's a very, very simple practice. I think we'll try it for a few minutes here, learn it so it's one that you can actually use. Okay. Close your eyes again. And once again, imagine this person a few feet in front of you and remember all of the kind of sticky energy we felt when we asked you a series of questions. How comfortable do you feel saying what you really think to this person? How obligated do you feel? That stickiness. And so that's what we're going to be working with. And I want you to imagine, it's a strange picture, but like that there are tendrils of energy, almost like you're hooked in to this person. And imagine doing this person this thing that really triggers you. And you usually feel like a jolt somewhere in your body, often your belly or your heart. So again, imagine they're sort of doing the behavior that's triggering to you. And where do you experience that in your body? And particularly imagine there's like a large tube of energy that comes out from your body and is attached into their body, into their physical field. And we're going to be working with pulling our energy back, pulling in those tendrils. So put your hands in position 1. You're reaching out towards this person, palms up, fingers outstretched. And as we breathe in, you're going to be pulling your energy back from this person. Do that now. Inhale, pull back. And as you exhale, with a nice little sigh, ground into the earth. We'll do that several more times. Extend your energy out towards the person. Feel like you are reclaiming yourself. You're bringing your energy back into yourself. With the inhale, come in. Turning palms down. Exhaling into your own body and into the earth. Do that again. Palms outstretched, pulling in on the inhale, and then exhaling, sending down into the earth. Understand this has nothing to do with love. This is not love that we're pulling back. This is actually our own emotional dependency. You know, it's almost if we're dependent on drawing energy for our sense of self and security from this person. These are the attachments that create the stickiness. And so anything that threatens that flow of energy, we get anxious, we contract. And so in our interactions, we may feel like energy is being sucked out of us, but it's actually us that's feeding off that energy in some way. So knowing all that, looking one more time, put your palms outstretched towards them, hands outstretched, and with a great sense of separateness, of rightness, of integrity for yourself, breathe in, pull your energy back, palms down, send it into the earth. Poor boundaries actually interfere with closeness. And so just to demonstrate that now, with the same person for a moment, come back to the compassion exercise. And for this moment, put your hands in the prayer position physically. See this person, separate from your confusion about who they are. They are this beautiful, evolving soul, doing their best to find their way through this confusing human existence. And seeing through that, seeing to the essence, their actual being, we bow to that. And take one moment from this space, separate, standing in your own life, in your own body on this planet. Offer them the most simple well wishes. May you be happy. May you be free from suffering. May you be well. May your heart be filled with love.
Thank you, Robert. And I just want to say, you may find yourself in a situation where drawing your hands back and going right with the person there might not be appropriate, but you can actually work with this concept and this energy of doing this without the movement, without the big exhale, and try to embody it in such a way that, you know, you've walked in, you're back home, you're with your partner, they've done something that's upset you. Can you, in fact, just imagine that in that moment where you may be activated and drawn in an unhealthy way, and just, okay.
The beauty is you're releasing them also. This is not just self-protection. You're releasing the both of you.
Mm.
I actually want to thank you so much for that series of exercises, because I think the word balance is so precious and hard to understand. I used to be very disdainful of it. I thought, well, that's like being mediocre, you know, or something. And really, it's so important. I think even reading the chat, I see a lot of people wrote about that first exercise of compassion, that it made them sad, you know, and there are ways we get engulfed, and it doesn't, as you say, Robert, it doesn't help the other person either, because we're so engulfed. And it feels like, you know, intellectually, like it's rejection to have space, or it's pushing away or indifference, but it's not. It's really integrity, which was another beautiful word that you used. And so I found myself thinking, I wonder what it would be like to do the boundary exercise first, which you ended up doing, you know, because sometimes that's what we need to actually care without just being overwhelmed in any relationship.
And we had thought about doing that, but then with the way the conversation evolved. But again, it's like this, you know, this back and forth of how we set boundaries in a good way with respect, and because that communicates so well. And you said this earlier, Robert, which way do we fall off the bike? You know, that's really good to know about ourselves. It's like I fall off in terms of being too wide open and not expressing my needs and not taking care of myself and taking care of everybody else.
Are you talking about me?
No, darling. And, or I fall off in terms of being too boundary, but not in a caring or respectful way.
Well, Sharon, what do you think? Are we ready to move to the next topic? All right, good. I'll try to help us.
We've covered boundaries and empathy. Fine, that's done.
Yeah, the human condition. We're about 4/5 of the way there, I think. I just, you know, I thank you so much for the meditation, and I'm struggling with this notion that I need to stop having these mental arguments with my nemesis, because those are the only ones I win with that person. So that's very challenging. That's a very challenging discipline. I like winning, so what can I say? Sharon and I would like to take a next deeper step into this rich conversation. We've been talking about intimate relationships, partnerships, friendships, people close in our lives. And so the question arises, how do we translate some of this into healthy relationships in our work lives, where we may have physical proximity, either with our colleagues or with the people we're serving, but we don't have that personal intimacy. It's a relationship of a different sort, and then on out from there into relationships with absolute strangers, which we may not get to, but at least to flag the subject. So how do you understand from your own long experience in workplaces and in human service, how these conditions apply in relationships of that sort, where they're really, you know, they're so important. It's as possible to get entangled and messed up with folks in that category as with close in people.
I think we see the same balance issues that you just described, Judith, and it's interesting. In a lot of organizations, there's a lack of connection. There's a lack of human heart. There's a lack of compassion. And the work with those organizations often is to see each other as people, not just instruments to get the work done. And so in those situations, we're often creating experiences where people can connect empathically and talk about their families and talk about the lineage. You know, we'll have people bring an object of sort of where they come from that represents their lineage, and they share that with people, and people's hearts start to open to each other. And we want to cultivate more of that human connectivity in the workplace because we spend so many hours a day there. Interesting enough, then we see the other issue equally common. The key words that I dread hearing are, we're a family here. You know, we don't fire people for a family. This is where the wisdom, where the context comes of what's right relationship. If you're a supervisor and the person you're supervising, no, this is not a family relationship. You're there to serve a common mission. That's the goal, the glue that holds you together. And what's appropriate right relationship, given that you're here to serve a mission? It's a very different context that requires a different kind of boundary. So in those contexts, we're often helping people learn to go like, no, and it's very also, you know, we see organizations which were built by friends together, and there's a deep friendship. And the mode of friendship actually comes into conflict with the mode of accountability for getting the work done. Very, very challenging territory for people.
Yeah, or even are people in the right positions, or should they stay there? So yeah, that same territory. But I actually love to hear more from you before I jump in talking.
Now I hand it off to the person who really knows this stuff. Now I hand it off to the person who really knows. Sharon.
What is echo? What I was thinking again, the word balance and boundaries with those we're trying to serve, because sometimes the mission of the organization, I would think, is I'm going to relieve human suffering. I think was one mission statement, of an organization I was deeply involved in. Free the hearts and minds of all who seek freedom. I was like, okay, but there's this person in front of me who's like a wreck, like, what do I do? Yeah. And, it can be so overwhelming in itself, that sort of idealism or emphasis on altruism, and boundaries can seem awfully selfish. And yet, I love that exercise so much that you led us through, because it was so clear to me. I didn't say yes. I didn't raise my hand to like absolutely everything, but it was a lot, in terms of a tendency. That was clear. And to understand that, it felt so different to have that boundary in place and then extend the sense of compassion.
As you're talking, what's occurring to me is my earlier life as a psychotherapist and then training psychotherapists. And, those of us who both have a sense of mission and caring, which most of us do, not every human being, but I'm guessing most of the people on this call have a sense of calling and purpose and wanting to contribute to the greater good. And back in those therapy days, what I found for myself that I had to learn was I would be too much in the other person. Their problems felt like my problems. I felt like I had to fix them, solve it, figure it out, give them just the right amount of wisdom. And then as I kind of learned, like, oh, my job is to hold presence. My job is to listen. My job is to have compassion for what they're telling me, whether that's an organizational problem or a managerial problem or a personal problem, and that I can best serve by being the space in which the other can find their own wisdom. And that's a skill and an art. And I have trained a lot of therapists, and the young ones generally have to go through a process of learning what it is to hold the space, know that, the acupuncture point to speak to or to invite the other to. And so that is somewhat of the dance. My heart's not closed, but it's not mine to fix. It's mine to contribute to, but not to fix.
Yeah.
I would guess that most of you are in organizations where there's some struggle around work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing we're talking about, boundaries, is very close to the heart of what causes that. Yes, there's a natural impulse. There's so much need in the world we want to give to that. But typically we're adding something to that. Okay, and that's what happens in the personal lack of boundaries. There's a way in which we have some unfilled need in ourselves that gets hooked on to another human being. Well, we bring that into the workplace. And in addition to that kind of natural desire to serve and to give back to life, there is for most of us, and certainly has been for me in my life, I'm weaving it, an unfilled need, a need for love, a need for affirmation, a need to feel okay about myself that gets acted out into lack of boundaries and overwork. And so the same principles are really at play here, because yes, you can try to fix it with kind of, turning off your hours of when you can get access the computers. But as long as that impulse is untended in us, that hunger that gets acted out. And again, we can make a case, okay, if you're going to be addicted, maybe it's better to be addicted to serving people than to drug abuse. But it is an addiction all of its own. And it's one we all struggle with individually and collectively in our organizations. And so the same principles of pulling our energy back. And there is a place to do this work that is from a different place, that's not so needy. That allows us also, we're training so many young activists, like, we need you here for the next 50 years, and we need to find a different way of where we do this work from that is actually more sustainable and is actually, we have more wisdom when we're not acting from that place. So the same principles really apply to the workplace and to our social change efforts.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Parker.
No, please, Judith.
Well, I was just going to say, you said when we come from our projections, we also carry with us our reactivity and our triggering. And in the workplace and in personal relationships, when people are acting that way from their triggering, they're not conscious of it, they're acting out, whether that's the projective field or, you remind me of my sister. We're carrying that, and every managerial issue that I've ever had on my plate as a coach and a consultant really has to do with one or both, usually both people are activated in some way and often unconscious or unskillful. And when that can get calmed, then you might have a hard decision in front of you or a real nitty-gritty problem, but then you can work in partnership, in relationship. Everything from deciding to let someone go if they're really not performing in a way that's appropriate to their role, to collaborating, like, how are we going to solve this together? But when we're not clean and clear in ourselves, we generally make messes.
Yeah. So just one more piece for the conversational pot around this particular issue. One of the things we know from research, as you guys know, is that the most successful organizations in terms of pursuing their mission are very high on relational trust, which various social scientists have measured, I think, effectively and convincingly. And they're also dependent on leaders who understand that the cultivation of relational trust is key to mission success. So that leads to things like the thing you mentioned, Robert, earlier in these few minutes here, of more storytelling in the organization so that people get to know each other's biographies at least a minimal non-invasive level. That's absolutely critical, and it is possible. It's done in smart organizations who recognize that it's not healthy for people to work alongside each other 5, 10, 20 years without knowing any more about each other's stories than the day they took the job, which is often the case. And then at the same time, the other pole of this paradox, as you've said, organizations perform functions and they hire people to perform those functions. And functionality is a very important part of the equation, which is partly why relational trust is important. Functionality improves with relational trust. But to make this a little personal, when I was a young man, I gave a number of years of my life to an organization that in the end didn't seem to love me in return, right? I loved them and invested myself heavily in that mission, but was heartbroken when my love went unrecompensed. You know, I was like an unrequited lover. And then I had this kind of bolt of insight. Organizations don't do love. People do love. And I had to learn a different calculus for understanding that organizational matrix. I had to respect it in its own right, but I had to fully understand its limits in relation to some of the movements of the heart that have always animated me. So no one formula, no one size fits all, but does that make sense to the two of you?
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense. And it's interesting, you know, we've been at this work, working with organizations for probably 30 years now. I'm also seeing some trends and changes. 30 years ago, my work felt much more opening people's hearts in an organization, helping to understand, slow down to go faster, build relationship, build some of that trust so that when you have an organizational issue, people can actually focus on the issues and not be acting out their lack of trust on each other. And we started introducing lots of practices of different kinds into organizations to support ritual, to support greater connectivity, greater human connection, greater compassion, but in the last 5-6 years, we're starting to see the balance shift the other way. Very often having to come into organizations that have started doing practices, they're actually releasing trauma and, you know, people sharing their deeper personal things in a context and space that was never meant to hold that. And becoming personally engaged in ways that actually hurt their ability to perform their mission, which is so important to so many other people that depend on them, becoming too internally focused, having to try to retrain organizations that have really opened up those spaces, personal spaces, about how to boundary them in an appropriate way to get that balance that you're talking about of the trust and connectivity with the functionality. You know, all of our organizations tend to be under-resourced, and the needs we're trying to serve are great. And so our ability to serve our people well and effectively, it's a good thing. It's an important thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, among other things, the questions, the probes you put out to invite stories have to be carefully crafted to avoid the danger of invasiveness, because invasiveness in the workspace is like fascism in the political space. And it's just, it's wrong and it's toxic. It's terrible. So a question like, you know, what's the worst thing you ever did that you have never told someone about, you know, share or die. This is not a good question, but
well,
maybe.
or even tell me, you know, everything you think about me, you know, and all your judgments of me. No, we don't want to go there. And we are, as Robert's saying, seeing some really challenging fallout where organizations with fabulous missions are having their energy diverted into the personal trauma and inappropriate expectations, as you said earlier, Parker, of what an organization can and should be. Part of that is a growing edge, I think, on many levels, but it's been we've been dealing with some pretty challenging situations.
I think in the last couple of years, particularly, you know, there are long overdue conversations about abuse of women and about race happening in our organization.
And equity as well.
Yeah, they desperately need to happen. But what's happening, because it's reached deep into human hearts and human psyche and trauma, that the conversations are often not well held. And the way that you've been talking about holding it, so that the important conversations, which are critical, start becoming toxic. They start tearing trust down. There's not enough trust actually to have the conversations in a way that actually brings mutual understanding, education, and the structural changes that need to happen in some of these organizations. So finding that balance, opening up the space that's enough that people can bring their authentic experiences of how they felt in this organization, but also held and boundaried appropriately in a way that creates something good for the individuals and for the organizations and society is a real challenge at this particular time.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's a whole raft of questions that can really help weave the fabric necessary to hold the harder conversations. simple questions like, is there an elder in your life that's been important to you that you might say a few words about? Or how did you earn your first dollar? Pretty simple questions that don't have that invasive quality and allow a person to answer at whatever depth they choose. I think choice is such a big element here. So what do you think, Sharon? Next step?
I'll tell you, the first thing I think is that I'm going to be in some totally inappropriate situation, like leading a meditation. And what's going to come into my mind is, tell me the worst thing you've ever done that you've never disclosed to anybody. And I'm going to start laughing and no one is going to know why. So it's like just, in my brain now.
Just text me. I'm here to help.
Thank you. It's like, oh, I can't believe it. Yes, why don't we go on? You had, Parker, a topic that, it was very meaningful for you to bring up. So this is the time, I think.
Okay, thank you. I didn't want to talk too much, but quickly, the topic that Sharon and I were thinking about is, how do we translate all of this for people we simply plain do not know, the so-called stranger, who in today's climate easily becomes or has become the enemy? It's a big, as you well know, a big political issue today, the othering of whole communities of people, and therefore the growth of hatred and again, proto or genuine fascism in this democracy of ours. What are your thoughts about?
Well, first of all, I would say my feeling is like, this is a challenging time, certainly for many of us. And to acknowledge, like, okay, we're in a multiplicity of real challenges. We have our beliefs about how each of us, my guess is we've got a strong bias in this call. It's our bias. I think my bias is correct. Other people think their biases are correct. And what do we do and how do we work with in skillful ways? And where's the best use of our energy? And, there's two parts, and I want to come back to the lovely opening that you gave, Parker, where you were talking about, we're connected to everyone and everything. We're all part of a same fabric, which I think is foundational for those of us who may have a more progressive, or we might say holistic view, or at least we think that's what it is. And that we're looking beyond individual needs, both ours and our specific communities, into how does impact flow around the world. And, it's tough. So how do we look at the other or the enemy in a way that has a prayer? I don't know if it will happen, but a prayer of promoting good conversation and shared problem solving. I keep on thinking the Olympics are coming up, and when you're doing the gymnastics or the dives, there's a level of difficulty. So I think when we start to talk about the other, and particularly the enemy or those who are really politically opposed and working against what we care about, the level of difficulty, the dial goes way up. I think the principles and practices are actually the same. They may require more boundary, but how can we do that with respect? And that's where you said those conversations, the most successful things I've been involved in has been where we've got, 6, 8, 10, 15 people in a room from really different political and social orientations. And we're having a humanizing conversation that's respectful. We may not come to the same conclusions. We often don't. We may have very different strategies, but how do I stay in the truth of my own experience, my own values, what I want to see, what I'm working for, and work in a respectful way to kind of bridge. And that's the work, of course, of transpartisanship in the political world, it's a tall mountain, level of difficulty 15, you know.
I felt when you spoke, Palmer, to be honest, I felt sad. I felt this wave of sadness coming up. Having been at this like yourself for a number of decades here, othering is actually on the rise right now. And that's very painful to watch. The degree of othering is as bad inside. We often work in the progressive world. The othering that's happening there is as bad as the othering that's happening, to people that are all that different. I think there are a number of reasons for it. There is a real rising for freedom from oppressed communities all around the world, which is a beautiful thing, which is creating forces of reaction that are threatened by that. I actually believe that climate change is already happening. Research shows what happens to animals when heat rises. I think we're actually starting to see the impact of that. And of course, COVID kind of lit a fire under everything. So it's a time of a great deal of othering, which is very sad.
It's scary too.
Yeah.
I find it scary.
And requires all of us. But it is funny because the two practices we've been working with, they still sit under this in order to meet the stranger with openness rather than reactivity. We have to feel well bounded and grounded in ourselves and be willing to choose the practice of compassion when we least feel like doing it. And those go together. The safer we feel grounded in our own being present in this moment and present and grounded in our bodies, the more we'll be able to use the practice of compassion. So those two practices still help us here. And yes, to affect what Judith is saying, there's a lot of othering going on, and it asks a lot of us to be willing to be ones who participate in the healing of that rather than becoming an addition to the other.
Exactly. Subject for another webinar, I think.
It is. It's an important one, and I'm sure all of us are feeling in different ways the challenges in front of us. And also to say that certainly in my own experience and working with others, there are moments where you bow out, like there's not going to be a meeting ground in this particular place. And where do I need to take my energy? And how do I sustain myself and my community in some degree of hope might not be the best word anymore. I used to feel hopeful, but how do I sustain myself in the face of challenges to keep on, okay, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to do my best. One of the things that this kind of takes me to, which I think has been fundamental, certainly to my development, our development, is cultivating comfort with discomfort, or equanimity with discomfort, that there's a lot of uncomfortable stuff in the world, in us, in our families, in our workplace. So how do we continue to cultivate, okay, that's just part of life. That's part of the human condition. It's probably always been this way. It's our time, and certainly with the addition of climate issues at the time, the heat is really turned up. But I still think that that's a fundamental practice and thing for each of us to need to cultivate. Can I be comfortable with discomfort? And then how can I move from there?
No, and I think Judith and Robert, you're about to start bringing us to a close. So very much over to you both.
So friends, we're going to do a briefer guided meditation again to do our best to kind of weave together some of the threads, the rivers that we've been talking about. So if you would, again, please close your eyes. And settle in on the breath, the sense of letting the energy in the mind settle like a feather through honey, just sending and inviting energy to settle in your belly and to feel your connectedness to this precious earth, to feel your care, to feel your support and how you are supported. And in next breaths, we open ourselves to feeling that sense of interconnectedness, literally where the boundaries of our skin may become permeable, so that as we breathe, we're breathing life in and returning it to life itself. And we bring our attention to those close in, our family, our loved ones, and we feel our connectedness to them. And we go out the next circle to colleagues and those we serve. And we feel our connectedness, but we return again and again to this sense of sovereignty, our sense of our own being, our safety in ourselves, our own seat that allows us with this sense of, me and we, me and you, appropriate boundaries, the capacity to move in and out in a fluid, easeful way. The capacity to keep on remembering, especially in those moments where we may be thrown off, out of balance, activated, scared, full of grief and loss. Can we return again to here I am, in this body, in this life? Our separateness, our sovereignty, our own needs and aspirations. And then can we again open to taking in, to cherish others, those we love, those we care about, who are colleagues, those we serve, the principles that we serve, the vision that we have, the stardust, the ground, all of it. We're not separate. Can we feel that our compassion comes from this innate knowing of inseparability? And then can we return again? Here I am, my own seat, my own life, my own history, my own conditions, my own needs. And take a moment, just flow yourself a few times in and out through, here I am. Here I, born separate, will die separate. Have an individuation, a life, a path. And then open boundaries. And this separate self cares for the whole, is part of the whole, is nourished and fed by the whole, is inspired by the whole. And now let's take a minute to turn up that dial and bring into our awareness those who we strongly differ from, those who may frighten us, make us angry, those who seem to be working at complete cross purposes to what we are dedicated to what we care about. And know that those we are calling to mind actually have the same feelings about us. That's a hard one. So we stay with ourselves. We feel as much as we can respect and understanding that the other may view us similarly. And to the best of our capacity, we marry in this moment our sovereignty, our separateness, then our connection to our community of like-hearted, like-minded beings. We feel our connectedness to the world and how the movement of life moves through everything and all of us. And then we expand to include, as if our arms were as wide as the universe, the other, possibly the enemy or opponent. And can we hold them as well as part of this fabric of life? Can we cultivate our comfort with our discomfort? And back home in your body. And again, hands in prayer position, and open your eyes. And if you're not on gallery view, please put yourself on gallery view, which I am going to do for myself. And let's bow to one another. And thank you all for all your good hearts, all your good intentions, all the wonderful service that you do in small ways and big ways.
Well, thank you so much for all of this offering. It's really been tremendous. And I think one of the things I'm taking away is a kind of fundamental remembrance is openness to learning.
Yeah, I want to thank you too, Robert and Judith. It's been wonderful conversation. And at several points in the conversation, I thought about the critical role of self-knowledge in these relationships with others of every sort. Two examples come quickly to mind. One is when someone comes to you with a problem that they'd like to talk about, and after 60 seconds of listening, you say, "I know exactly how you feel." Well, you don't. You don't one little bit. And when that's said to me, I'm out of there psychologically. That's because the truth about any of us is we don't even know exactly how we feel. We are a mystery to ourselves. So how in God's name can we know how another person feels? So self-knowledge is a rescuer at that point. I don't know how this other person feels because I really don't. There's a mystery about me that I'll probably never understand, having spent 82 years trying to fathom it and not there yet. And then one other thing, in our relations to the stranger, it's so very clear that so many of these issues are rooted in projection by people who have yet to come to terms with the stranger in themselves. I don't think I have ever had a strong reaction to otherness that wasn't traceable back to something about myself that I had yet to embrace, and especially because I didn't like it. So, Socrates said, an unexamined life is not worth living. And I just want to add, if you choose to live an unexamined life, please don't have anything to do with other people.
May your prayers to back to those ears.
And don't try to run an organization either.
So I think I'm just going to echo what Sharon and Parker said, thanking you, Judith and Robert, for the wonderful sharing that you brought into our session today. Erica has shared a little bit more about the practice that you also hold into the chat, just for everyone to have that. And then also just again, thank you to Parker and Sharon, our wonderful co-hosts for the series. This has just been an absolutely terrific session. So normally we do a blurb for the next session in the series. It's not going to be in August. It's actually going to be in September. There's a summer break that's happening in between, but we will pick this up again in September, again on the second Tuesday of the month. And that session is going to focus on interconnectedness with a particular orientation to the natural world. And we have two absolutely fabulous speakers that will be joining us in conversation with the wonderful Sharon and Parker. So we're looking forward to seeing you all then. And then as we normally do, the wonderful Dean of our Inner Work programs, Nancy Mortefi, will be hosting a cafe style session on the last Tuesday of this month, the fourth Tuesday that is, for anyone that wants to go deeper into the kind of content that was explored in today's session. The information for that cafe session is shared in the follow-up email that comes to everyone attending the webinars. And we might even have a special guest joining, Nancy, one of the speakers from today's session. So just for everyone to know. And so just to bring us for a close, and wishing everyone a wonderful next month and a half, we'd love to just ask everyone to turn on their microphones, their video, and we'd love to just have people dial out by just saying thank you and goodbye to our wonderful group of speakers so they can hear us, and also get a bit of a sense for all of us that have been together in today's session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Keep safe and well.
Nice. Thank you so much for the invitation.